Okay, so today we're going to look at behaviorism. Behaviorism is a physicalist, a materialist theory. That means it only believes in the physical world and the physical person, not in anything like a non-physical mind. The key idea with behaviorism is that your consciousness is only behavior. Now, we're going to get to a more specific definition than that, because that's not exactly right, but it characterizes the central idea, which is to say that it reduces our descriptions of consciousness, like I am in pain, to descriptions of behavior, like I am injured and I am screaming and so on. Nice example. Well done, Luke. Okay, so that's what behaviorism fundamentally is. We're going to go through each element now, just to fully understand it. So I just want to start with its roots. Now, it has its roots in psychological behaviorism. This was a more scientific approach to psychology, moving away from the kind of interesting literature of Freud and Jung. People like Skinner and Watson wanted to make psychology scientific. They wanted to make it testable. So they thought that the only useful things are to look at behavior. And so what they realized with behavior is that you can look at kind of the the inputs and the outputs, and predict a huge amount of what's going in. Inputs happen here and then outputs there. And just looking at those things that are measurable, people like Skinner and Watson thought you could start to understand how animals behaved and also how humans behaved. Skinner, for instance, did a lot of work with rats, and was able to train them through a series of inputs to produce certain outputs, including in the Second World War flying missiles. No, that was pigeons. Oh dear, sorry about that. That was pigeons. Rats, he did all sorts of things, including making them dance and so on. So that's one thing. This kind of trend in the early 20th century, so the early 1900s, towards a behaviorist understanding of psychology in science. Another thing that comes along with this is the rejection of philosophical dualism. So Gilbert Ryle here, he thinks that dualism commits a category error. Now, a category error is where you mistake one sort of thing for being in one category when in fact it's in another, which is an extremely confusing thing I've just said, right? Treating something as existing in a different category. Ryle gives us a whole range of examples to illustrate his point. I think if I give you a few, you'll see what we mean here. So the Bodleian Library is an example of a building in the city of Oxford, along with the building of University College and the exam halls and Christchurch College and so on. Imagine you're a tourist and you go around and you see each of these buildings. Well, at the end, you might say, well, those are very interesting buildings, but, where's the university? Well, what you've done there is that you have treated the something, in this case, the university, as believing it as existing in the same category as the buildings themselves. But Oxford University isn't the buildings. It's the way that the buildings and the people in it behave. It exists in a different kind of category. Let me give you one other example. I know, by the way, absolutely nothing about cricket. Like, absolutely nothing. I find it incredibly dull. I apologise to anybody who enjoys cricket. So I might be going and watching a cricket match and have a friend of mine tell me what's going on. Like, this is, I believe, the bowler over here. Yes, it's a bowler. And the batsman, and these are wickets down here. And they might explain all of that. And then they might say, oh, the team's in good spirits today. And I might say, oh, okay, well, that's the bowler, that's the batsman, that's the wickets. Where are the team's spirits? Again, I've misunderstood what team spirit is. It's in a different category to the bowler and the batsman and the wickets. It is something else. And what Ryle says is that thinking that the mind exists as this kind of immaterial thing is to think it exists in the same kind of category as the brain. But it doesn't. It is not an object. It's not in the object category. Just like the university isn't in the object category of buildings and team spirit isn't in the object category of players. Instead, it doesn't exist at all. It is, says Ryle, not this, just behaviour. It's just the behaviour of a person. Okay, so that's Ryle's rejection of dualism. I think that one of the other main reasons we might end up believing in behaviorism, or people believed in behaviorism, is Carl Hempel's argument based upon the verification principle. This is a lot of stuff, isn't it? Verification principle is incredibly important to understand in this course. So let's just go into it very quickly. I'll go into my definition colour. The verification principle says statements are only meaningful. So meaningful here, by the way, means literally contains meaning. So a statement like the sun is a burning ball of gas is meaningful. A statement like is not meaningful. But statements are only meaningful if they are empirically verifiable. What that means is, can I test them? So what we mean there, what Aya means there, that's Aya, by the way, A-J, Aya. What Aya means there is that the only statements that actually genuinely have meaning are those that we can test. Okay? Now, Hempel says, well, one second, statements about mental states, are they testable? No. They aren't testable. You know, if someone says to you that, I'm sad, they're talking about an internal mental state. They're the only ones that are actually feeling that. You might say, oh yeah, but I can see that they're crying and so on, but then you're talking about behaviour. Statements about behaviour are empirically verifiable. The actual feeling of sadness, though, not empirically verifiable, not testable. And if that's the case, well then they are, of course, that's meant to be an M. They are, of course, meaningless. So all of this contributes to the kind of behaviorism that we're interested in, which is philosophical behaviourism. So philosophical behaviourism is of a slightly different kind. It says that statements about consciousness, if you remember those qualia statements, and any internal mental state, statements about consciousness can be reduced, so that is taken apart and changed into statements about behaviour and this is the important bit, without loss of meaning. So I can, says Hempel especially, I can take a statement like, let's say this guy here, he is, let's use the example at the beginning. I can take a statement like, let's call him Fred. Fred is in pain. Okay. Now that of course is a statement about consciousness, isn't it? Those two, well, they're the same thing. Okay. But what we can do is we can make this a meaningful statement, because of course, according to the verification principle, it's not a meaningful statement. And it doesn't fit with our understanding of which category kind of mental things are in. So we can reduce this down to other statements without loss of meaning. If we reduce it down to Fred is injured, now that is empirically verifiable, that is testable. We can see this blood coming out of his leg. There's a lot of blood. I drew a pool at the bottom. Fred is injured. Fred is crying. And so on. Well, what we've got there is a whole list of behaviours that we think equal, a behaviourist will think, equal that. There's no loss of meaning. These things here, so Fred is injured and crying, those are publicly observable behaviour. And those behaviours are all that we need in order to understand what is going on. So behaviourism, philosophical behaviourism, is a statement about the language we use to describe consciousness. And the central point is that consciousness can be described in just observable behaviour without losing any meaning in statements like pain or sad or happy. So that's what philosophical behaviourism is.